According to Brene Brown, author of several New York Times bestsellers, including The Gifts of Imperfection, let go of who you think you're supposed to be and embrace who you are. The definition of perfectionism goes like this. Perfectionism is a self-destructive and addictive belief system that fuels the thought, if I look perfect, live perfectly, and do everything perfectly, I can avoid or minimize the painful feelings of shame, judgment, and blame. Hi, I'm Deborah Poneman, founder of Yes to Success, where we share knowledge and tools for you to live your ultimate life and ageless, anti-aging for your brain, body, and future. Brene Brown goes on to explain that perfectionism is self-destructive simply because there's no such thing as perfect. Perfection is an unattainable goal and is, in fact, only really about perception. We want to be perceived as perfect, but it's unattainable because it doesn't exist, and there's no way to control other people's perception of you, regardless of how much time and energy you spend trying. Perfectionism is addictive because when we do experience being judged or blamed or feeling shame, we often believe it's because we weren't perfect enough. So rather than question the faulty logic of perfectionism, we become even more committed to our mission of living, looking, and doing everything just right. So how do we overcome perfectionism? Well, we need to be able to acknowledge our vulnerabilities and, of course, practice self-compassion. When we become more loving and compassionate with ourselves, and we begin to practice what Brene calls shame resilience, we can embrace our imperfections. That is, embrace our imperfections. And it's in the process of embracing our imperfections that we find our truest gifts and create our most meaningful connections and deepest relationships. So first, I want you to notice the difference between perfectionism and healthy striving. Healthy striving is simply wanting to do a good job for positive reasons and not because you believe that if you're perfect, you can avoid unhappiness and, of course, shame, blame, and judgment, all three of which we need to accept as realities of life. So when you find yourself, for example, rewriting the report that your boss asks you to write, rewriting it for like the 10th time, ask yourself, am I just wanting to do a good job, or am I trying to be perfect in order to avoid the aforementioned shame, blame, or judgment? And be honest with yourself. And if the answer is the latter, stop and accept good enough. Or you can always ask for help, but that's something perfectionists have a hard time doing. But it's really that simple. You can, at that moment, also remind yourself that perfection doesn't exist in relative creation. And further, no one is going to notice the difference between excellent and what you think is perfect. You can also remind yourself that the time and energy it takes to go from excellent to what you think is perfect is simply not worth your time. It's not worth your health. It's not worth your relationships. Brene also says that the need to be perfect is what kills creativity. I mean, how can you let creativity loose when you're afraid to make a mistake? It's impossible. It even kills risk taking for the same reason. If you take a risk, there's always the chance you won't appear perfect. And risk taking is what leads to the greatest success in life, especially entrepreneurial success. You got to take risks. So here's a test to see if you fall in the category of perfectionist. Okay, here's your test. I have it over here. Number one, you feel compelled to be the best in everything you do, even if it's something you don't even care that much about. Number two, you're hypercritical and highly conscious of your and other people's mistakes. Number three, you spend much of your time to perfect something, even at the expense of your health and well-being. Number four, you set absolute ideals There is only black and white, no gray. Number 5, you beat yourself up over the smallest thing that goes wrong. Anybody seeing themselves so far? Number 6, you obsessively mull over outcomes and how you could have done things differently if they didn't turn out as perfectly as you had envisioned. Number 7, you're hypersensitive and defensive towards criticism. Number 8, you are so obsessed about achieving your goal that you seldom, if ever, enjoy or even notice the journey. So there they are. And basically, I just want to invite you to, if you saw yourself in one or more of the above or all of the above, I invite you to let go of the need to be perfect, because the opposite of perfection isn't imperfection or even mediocrity. The opposite of perfection is reality. I'll see you next week.